Okay, we are here with April Ajoy. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, it's Ajoy. It's actually my
Ajoy.
middle name. But you can say Ajoy. People say it that way a lot.
Okay, okay. I have to tell you, I absolutely loved your book. I want you to show it. Can you show it to
Yeah, here,
everybody?
let me
Because I don't have a hard copy. I
I'll
read it.
grab it. Hold on.
I see it behind you there. So you guys, I'm so excited. April wrote the best book about coming out of Christian nationalism.
I normally have it right by me, but I've been cleaning. But here it is.
I just love the cover. I mean, I just love every Star Spangled Jesus.
Yes.
And then what's the tag? Leaving
Leaving Christian
nationalism.
nationalism and finding a true faith.
I love it, April. I mean,
Thank
everybody
you.
needs to read this book. So,
I
and I love
appreciate that.
the cover design. I love everything about it. I just think it's so timely, so relevant. And you guys will love this book because she also injects humor into the book. And so that is what is helping us get through these times. So,
Yeah,
April,
we try. We laugh so we don't have to cry all the time.
exactly. Exactly. So, April, give the audience just a brief synopsis of your childhood because that's kind of what is really pivotal about you writing this book is your background. You've got the intel.
Yes. Yeah. So I basically grew up a Christian nationalist in that world, but we wouldn't have called ourselves that. We thought we were just being good Christians, which I think is the case to be made for a lot of people today. So I grew up, my dad was an evangelist. My grandfather was a pastor of a pretty large church in Dallas. So I was a evangelist kid and a pastor's kid. Um, and my dad would preach in different churches all over the country and the world. We'd go into a motorhome when I was in high school. We took a America Say Jesus bus tour, and we had America Say Jesus written on all sides of the bus. And the goal was to get, at the time, President George W. Bush to start saying Jesus. And my dad had a prophetic warning on a book he wrote, also called America Say Jesus, that basically said, unless America defined her God, which is Jesus, that God would lift the veil of protection and that we would experience bloodshed. So like our mission at that point was to make America Christian again because we believed that America was founded as a Christian nation and that it should stay a Christian nation, and that when we allowed certain sins into our country, that's when God allowed bad things to happen, such as 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina or, whatever bad thing you can think of. It was because we allowed sin in and because we weren't being a good Christian nation like we were supposed to do. I also wrote a song to go along with that called America Say Jesus, and I
I
sang it
watched it
on,
on YouTube.
yeah, I
Loved
sang it
it.
on the Jim Bakker show
Yes.
um, when I was a teenager. So so that's like my childhood. But then as an adult, I went and got my master's at Regent University, which is Pat Robertson's school, who founded the 700 Club. And then after that, I was a producer for the Christian Broadcasting Network that Pat Robertson started. So some of my pieces aired on the 700 Club. So it kind of went into adulthood too, as well. Just this, I would say our tenets were love God, love people, though exceptions applied, and vote Republican. Like those were, we just believed true Christians vote Republican. You couldn't really be a good Christian if you voted for a Democrat because they were led by Satan. So our faith beliefs were very interconnected with our political ideology, where they kind of became one and the same.
Exactly. Exactly. And I this is you're kind of telling my story because my husband and I came into the white evangelical church in our early 20s. Neither of us were raised in the church.
Mm,
But as we were embracing the faith and the tenets of Jesus, we didn't realize the republicanism and the nationalism is just in the waters. And
hmm
so we were embracing that at the same time without recognizing that those two things were conflating. So tell me in your own words, what is it that made you finally say, something is not right? Something
Mm.
is not right.
So, I mean, there were a lot of things along the way, like a lot of little things, because when you grow up in that world, it's a very black and white ideology, very much this is always wrong, this is always right. There's not nuance. The idea that you have to know is drilled into your head. So you always have to have a position. You have to know that you know that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt. But when you live with such a like white knuckled faith where you just like have to hold on to these beliefs and have to protect them, and there would be warnings against college professors or bad friends. Like Satan was always around the corner to tempt you or to make you doubt, and you needed to always shield yourself from that. But when you're holding your theological beliefs so tightly, little cracks happen along the way because there's a lot of cognitive dissonance within this belief system. So, but because my political beliefs and my theological beliefs were so connected that once I started kind of untangling one, the other untangled as well. So the first really big thing that happened that made me kind of start on this journey was my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 non-smokers lung cancer. It was like a really freak thing. Back in 2011, I was 23 at the time. And we were Pentecostal and charismatic. So we believed in like faith healing, like as long as you have enough faith that God would heal you and answer your prayer. But 4 months later, my dad died.
Mm.
And I knew that I could not have had more faith for that healing. Um, and God didn't answer the prayer. So I knew that that belief was wrong because it was wrong for me.
Mhm.
And there was just a lot of like gaslighting going on with Christians around me because they could not accept that God just didn't answer our prayer. They had to blame us. So they would say things
Oh,
like,
wow.
well, your God didn't heal your dad because you have some kind of unresolved sin in your family, or
Mhm.
because your dad was out of God's will and became a pastor instead of staying an evangelist, or, God did heal him. He just healed him in heaven. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that's not what we were praying for. So that kind of made me a little jaded with my more Pentecostal beliefs, but that opened the door for me to be open to learning about other things too. Because I was like, I know I was wrong on that belief. So it just kind of cracked the door open.
Okay.
And so there were a bunch of like the next thing, one of my brothers, like we grew up in a very homophobic household.
Mhm.
I mean, everyone was homophobic back then, in the church especially. But one of my brothers, when he was 26, flew out to visit me and my spouse in Virginia and came out to me as gay. And he grew up in the same household as I did. And he was bawling, said that he'd known since middle school and had spent the rest of his life to that point night after night begging God through tears to make him straight,
Mhm.
which is what the church tells you to do. Like, oh, just go take it to Jesus and Jesus will make you straight. But God never did. So I knew then that what I'd been taught about homosexuality was wrong.
Mhm.
That because I'd been taught only people are only gay if they're possessed by demons or if they have some kind of demonic influence that's making them choose to be gay, that no one's actually born that way. And I knew right then, like, okay, well, I'm wrong on that as well.
Mhm.
And so that sent me on a journey to figure out, like, I didn't know where I stood theologically, but I knew what was right in front of my eyes directly went against my beliefs at that point. And then the next really big thing, obvious, like, was when Donald Trump came on the scene in 2015 in the primaries. I was working at CBN 700 Club at the time in my little cubicle, and I just remember being really confused by how many Christians around me were really liking Trump because I remembered, like, when I was a nationalist, character really mattered to
Okay.
us,
I mean, it
like
sure mattered for Bill Clinton, right?
exactly. Like I remember I was a kid, but I remember my dad saying like Democrats are bad because they are defending Bill Clinton. And if he would lie to his wife, how much worse would he do to the American people? And he cannot be trusted because we need good moral character in the presidency. And
Yeah.
so that was instilled in my brain that Democrats were bad because
Yeah.
they weren't moral and Republicans were good because we only ever put up moral, good family men.
Exactly.
And then Donald Trump was not any of that.
Hmm.
Um, and like I think in 2016, I kind of looked at it. I was like, okay, well, maybe this was just a fluke, kind of like a glitch in the system.
Yeah.
I didn't think he was going to win. I was very confused by the evangelical support of him, but I also understood at that time why they wouldn't vote for Hillary. Um,
Hmm.
because I still believe like you couldn't really vote for a Democrat. I am a proud never Trumper. I never voted for him.
Same.
But in 2016, I didn't vote for Hillary either because I hadn't quite figured out that Democrats are not just pure evil like I had been taught.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, and then that obviously sent me on a years long journey where I'm still trying to figure out like I don't what like we clearly are not seeing the same thing. Like I mean he's straight up said he's never asked God for forgiveness.
Right.
Like he can't even pretend to be Christian well at all. And yet
Mhm.
they've turned him into not just a Christian, but like a hero of the faith, like a savior
Yes.
of Christianity, which to this day is still like, how can y'all not see this?
Mhm. So I love something that you wrote in the book. You wrote, one day you're a Bible believing Christian in a sanctuary, and the next you are at a political rally with a Jesus flag. So you're making the connection of how are these people, because some of them you know and love and have gone to church with. How is it one day they're in a sanctuary praising Jesus, and then on January 6th, they're waving a Jesus flag around at the same time that they are rioting and following this
Yeah.
criminal person?
Yeah. I mean, it was very eye-opening for me. I mean, me and my spouse recognized two people that were arrested in the insurrection, and we knew both of them from church. So there's a clear correlation between the violence we saw on January 6th and Christian nationalism. And I think the moment where I recognized the people on January 6th was this kind of aha moment for me. Because up until that point, I kind of distanced myself from the Christian nationalism I was seeing. Like it was becoming very clear to me that, the Republican Christians were very hypocritical. Like that was becoming very obvious because they say one thing on Sundays about following the teachings of Jesus and welcoming the immigrant and holding up a deport them all, on Tuesday at a Trump rally. And
Yeah.
so like it became very clear to me that hypocrisy was loud and clear. But at that point, like I hadn't quite reconciled my own part that I played in Christian nationalism. I kind of distanced myself. I'm like, oh, these people have just gone crazy. Like they've lost the plot. Like they're just insane. Like they've just lost it. I don't know what's going on, but they are just crazy and I'm nothing like them. I've never been like them. Um but then when I recognized the people from church from like years ago, like from my dad's church, it was this like, oh, these are my people.
Yeah.
Like I was them. And so
Mhm.
that was kind of when I was like, oh shoot, I was a Christian nationalist. I'd been a Christian nationalist the whole time. Like my
Right.
quest to make America Christian, to vote for Republicans because I believed those were Christian policies. And even though like people along the way would say like, that's actually really harmful to people of color, to Black people, or what you're voting for is really harmful to queer people, and gay people, or what you're voting for is really harmful to women
Mhm.
and what they need in healthcare. And I would just kind of dismiss all that. I'm like, no, 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 no. I am doing what's right because I'm voting for Christian values or biblical
Yeah.
values, which I
That's
know
what.
now is a dog whistle for Christian nationalism.
So, one of the things I loved the most about your book is that you actually walk us through, um, from the beginnings of America and quote unquote, being a Christian nation. You walk us through how this has evolved into what we're seeing now, which is nothing but a hypocrisy, and to me, Christian nationalism is a false gospel. It's a
Hmm.
perversion of true Christianity that has risen up because we've got a leader now who will, give us everything we want, and he can be kind of the mascot for us to get everything we ever wanted, and we can, wave a Jesus flag around. But this isn't actually what Jesus told us to do, and this isn't true Christianity. So I love in the book how you walk us through that. I wanted to ask you, because you make the point that there are 45,000 Christian denominations in the world. What do you think makes those who are participating in Christian nationalism to this day, with it being so in our face, with the January 6th, 2021, and all of that stuff, what do you think makes them think they're the only true Christians?
That is a great question. I mean, I thought the same thing when I was in that world. I
Mhm.
think what most people don't realize about Christian nationalism is it hides in plain sight in American Christianity. So it's hard to know, okay, what about my beliefs are actually the teachings of Jesus and actually like historically part of the faith, and what is because of nationalism.
Mhm.
And that can be really hard to separate because it is so infused in American Christianity, specifically white American
Yeah.
Christianity. And so it's multiple things. Like Christian nationalism has its hand in media, especially if you're raised in it, like from a childhood, you've got indoctrination from birth. It's a very closed system. They say all are welcome and, they talk about community, but what they really mean is conformity. And so when you go into these churches and you join a white evangelical church, you're expected to hold the same beliefs as
Yeah.
everyone around you. And that's not just theological beliefs, that's also political beliefs.
Mhm.
There are dozens that I've seen personally online, pastors that believe voting for a Democrat is a sin and that it should put someone under church discipline.
Yeah.
So they have completely politicized Christianity and have made salvation about the way someone votes, where voting is almost this holy, sacred act, and then when you're insulated like that and you're in an echo chamber and you're a whole community, your family, often your pastors, if you're going to Christian schools, if you're watching Fox News or OAN, which all perpetuate Christian nationalism
Yes.
too. It's infiltrated the media, it's infiltrated Christian music and CCM.
Mhm.
It's infiltrated Christian radio, talk radio. Like you can live in this world as I did for many, many years without ever hearing an outside perspective. And if you are taught an outside perspective, it's usually very slanted and very biased and told through the lens of Christian nationalism or white evangelicalism. And it's always taught like we're right, we're true, and doubts are from Satan. And like, I mean, I went to a church where they did not want their youth to go to college. Like they discouraged their youth to go to college so they could stay at the church.
Mhm.
Because and that's another reason why we're seeing it play out, this war on education, which has been going on for years and years. But like Trump's executive order to like in his education order, one of the things he wants is to teach like patriotic education or patriotic history and no mention of racism and like things that actually happened because and I'm explaining it in a way from someone who has figured it out after leaving this world. No one in this world, like if you're no one perpetuating Christian nationalism is going to say it this plainly because I
Right.
don't think most of them even realize this is what they're doing or why they're fighting it. But the reason why they're fighting education so strongly is because American exceptionalism is very deeply connected to Christian nationalism. And if you believe that God blessed America, that God had his hand in founding this country, then you have to look the other way or completely ignore the fact that we committed mass genocide against indigenous people, that we endorsed slavery, and that most of the people in the South that wanted slaves, that went to war for them, used the Bible to justify owning people.
Mhm.
We've got a long history of being for segregation. Like the people that protested Ruby Bridges had scriptures on their posters. Like, so you can't look at that thing on like the history honestly, because then you have to reconcile with Christians and America being the bad guy. But if God had his hand in creating it, what does that say about God? So you have to protect it and whitewash history to make it seem like, oh, look, America's always been the good guy because God's always been for us and that's why we've been blessed. And so it's very insidious. And I don't even think most people realize that's why they're fighting education so much.
Mhm.
But it's a defense mechanism to protect the ideology
Mhm.
before anything else.
Mhm. You call it a groupthink in your book. And um, so, I mean, I've gone so far as to say that some of these behaviors that we're seeing are extremely cultish because,
Hmm.
cults will shun you if you step out of line. And that's exactly what happened with Steve and I when we went on record in to some of our friends in white evangelicalism that we were not comfortable with Trump, and we would not vote for him, and we did not think that was the Christian way to go. We were shunned. So
Yeah.
shunning is part of it. And then, like you said, um, trying to whitewash history and tell people not to be educated in truth so that you can hold them and confine them in this groupthink,
Yeah.
to have your way. So would you go so far as to say we've hit like this is a cult with a cult leader or a mass movement?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely culty.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, the behavior, it's a high control group for
Mhm.
sure. You've got one man, they have elevated Trump to now be the source of truth, where
Yep.
they will take what he says against no matter how many experts or how many educators or how many scientists or doctors or just journalists have facts. Like they can show facts and say, actually, what he's saying is wrong. And you have a whole group of people today that will say, mm-mm, that's fake news. So yeah, that is very culty behavior for sure.
It's
Um,
exactly what cult leaders do. They tell you, don't look at the news. You can only trust these sources. You can only trust the sources
yep.
that talk highly of me. Anything that criticizes me, you can't trust that. So this is cult behavior.
Yeah, I mean,
And
and look at how many families Donald Trump has ruined because, people on both sides, like it's hard to reconcile such extreme beliefs.
yeah.
And when you just will double down and you're so in it and you can't see the truth, even if the truth is right in front of you, it becomes very, very frustrating, especially when you are actively harming people and harming the marginalized and harming people that Jesus taught us to love and
Uh,
to take care of. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's awful. But historically speaking, like we hear in churches of Bonhoeffer as this hero of the faith who stood up to Hitler, but he was an anomaly. The vast majority of German Christian church supported Hitler.
mhm.
That we weren't taught that part of history.
No, we weren't taught that. I talk about that in my book because I show the similarities. I have a whole chapter about the similarities between Trump and Hitler,
Yeah.
and the charisma that they both have and the rallies and the pull on people. And so I think you've hit on something there. Um, one of the things that I loved that you talked about in the book too is that you talked about being what pro-life looks to you now. And because I know that that's a huge hang up for a lot of people, um, because they're so stuck on the pro-birth, they're not catching that, the holistic approach. Can
Yeah.
you can you tell me what that means to you now to be pro-life?
Yeah. To me, pro-life is seeing all life as sacred, the unborn, but also the mothers and children once they're born, and women and children in Palestine and children of immigrants. Like, I think being holistically pro-life is to be for the preservation of human life, period.
Mhm.
I think what gets lost in translation, which abortion is an easy issue to rally the masses around. If you can
Exactly.
convince people that abortion is the mass murder of babies, then, if you don't do any other digging, it's like, oh, well, that sounds like the right side. Like, who wouldn't be against baby murder? I mean, I'm not for baby murder. I don't know anyone who's actually for baby murder.
Right.
But, once I actually looked into the facts, which were not shared to me about what abortion actually is, like the fact that a DNC is the exact same procedure, whether it's for a miscarriage or for an abortion, and that it is filed in medical records the same way. And that if you ban abortion, you are now putting all pregnant women at risk if they need to have a DNC for a miscarriage, or an ectopic pregnancy. Um, and just on a very practical level, I learned too that if you actually want to lower abortions, that the abortion rate, the national abortion rate goes down when abortion is legal. When Democrats are in power, the abortion rate goes down. When
Right.
Republicans are in power, the abortion rate goes up or maintains. And that was like super shocking to me,
Mhm.
because I was like, that doesn't seem to make sense. If you're banning it, it should go down. But um, but that's just because Democrats address the problem generally speaking, and the problem is unwanted pregnancies. And how do you stop unwanted pregnancies? You give
Perfect.
um, easy, affordable access to birth control,
Mhm.
comprehensive sex education. Like, only teaching kids abstinence does not help anybody.
Mhm.
Um, and healthcare, paid family leave, economic enhancements like an actual livable wage. Like, there's so many factors that go into lowering the abortion rate
Mhm.
that are actually very practical, and statistically, not just in America, but like globally, show that it actually works and does not put women in harm's way at the same time. And so I actually believe the more, like people who are vehemently pro-life in the sense that they want to ban all abortion, that's actually pro-death, because not only are will abortions still happen, but now they're no longer safe. And now you're putting women in harm's ways, whether they want their baby or not.
Yeah.
Um, and I think actually being pro-choice, which is not pro-abortion. I don't know anybody who's actually.
But he is pro-abortion.
Right. They think people are going down to Starbucks and like getting a side of an abortion, like with
Yeah.
their coffee. And like, it's just really dismissive of that
Mhm.
choice. And here's the thing, I'm not a fan of abortion. Like,
Mhm.
I personally would not get one unless it was like my life or the baby's. And then I don't know what I would choose, but I know I would like to make that choice,
Mhm.
especially when I have two other kids. Do I risk them, growing up without a mom?
Right.
Like, these are really hard decisions that women have to make, and it is so dismissive to just say all women who get abortions are murderers, because it's just wrong.
Yeah, it's so awful. And I feel like I see Jesus sitting beside women, holding them, helping walk them through any tough decision like this. I don't see him banging them over the head, like bullying them and trying to dominate them, um, and control them. And I feel like when we come out and do that and say this is what Jesus wants, we're misrepresenting Jesus to people, which
Right.
all of Christian, that's the problem with Christian nationalism in general, is that it really is misrepresenting Jesus to people. So we're not actually doing what Jesus has asked us to do. We're just trying
Right.
to control and dominate and manipulate people, to our own quote unquote holy agenda, which is looking unholier by the
Yeah.
minute. So,
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and you can even just look at what happened to Jesus when he was arrested. And, they did the vote. Do you want Jesus or do you want Barabbas? And people wanted Barabbas. They said they wanted to crucify Jesus. And Jesus did not tell his disciples to storm Rome's capital to overturn the vote. Like
Mm.
he went willingly. And historically speaking, like even the early church, they thrived without power. It was never about,
Right.
we need power. We need the Christian church to be in control. It was very communal. It was about helping your neighbor. It was about family and community and love and sharing bread at a table. There was no calls to control the government.
No. And one of the things I fear is that we are, because we have made that, the ideal, we're actually any spiritual quote unquote power or grace or kindness or anything, that we actually get through the Holy Spirit to give away, compassion, love, mercy, tenderness, all of that is being lost in this greater message of we want to control you on behalf of the Lord.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I appreciate your book so much. I love how you walk us through your own personal history. You have a very unique story because of um, being enveloped in this Christian nationalism from the time you were a little girl. I love how you walk us through some of the history of our nation, and I love how you give us, a bright light and some things to hang on to, kind of like where can we go from here. I want to also mention your TikTok to everybody because I have found it to be therapeutic to myself. I think it is hilarious. Although I have to say, so what April does is um she goes on and she gives you an example of what, how a Christian nationalist is thinking or feeling about certain things. And I've seen myself too many times in some of your talks. And so it's always convicting, but it always makes me laugh because it's like, oh man, I'm still doing that or I'm still using that.
Well, a lot of, especially like the Christian mom or, I'm making fun of my old self too, like
Right,
things that I
right.
used to think and say. So,
Well, who among us hasn't sold those oils and like,
right.
I mean, I've done it all. I've done it all. So I love how you put a humorous touch to it because I think, I think the Lord he's really using you. And, like your name suggests, you're bringing joy to people in a certain way through this dark season. And you're bringing us wisdom, you're bringing us light, you're bringing us hope. And so I want to encourage everybody, run out and get this book, Star Spangled Jesus. Follow April on TikTok if you want to get some humor injected into your life. Where else can we find you?
I mean, I'm pretty much on all the social medias, Instagram, Threads. I'm still on Twitter somehow, Blue Sky, Facebook, YouTube, all the things. And then Tim Whitaker from the New Evangelicals and I have been hosting a weekly recap with him on the New Evangelicals, but we're actually starting a brand new show soon,
Love
like
it.
probably in the next week or two, called The Tim and April Show. And we're going to be talking about basically politics, news, and culture from a, anti-Christian nationalist perspective of people who come from that world.
Love it. Oh, I will be tuning into that. Yeah. Love Tim Whitaker. I love everything that you guys are doing to shed light on this topic and help us through these years. So very,
Well,
very much appreciate you, April.
thank you. And I appreciate you and all the good work you're doing in your book as well. So we need all of us to fight this Christian nationalism.
We're in it together. I keep telling people
Yes.
we're in it together and God will get us through. So thank you again for everything.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.